First of all, Diana is not being paid. So I tried too already and it didn't work, so join the club. But anyway, thank you, Diana, one more time to say thank you to you. And this is your chance, everyone, to give a big round of applause to all of our panelists. It's hard to say much of anything in 7 minutes, but to try to explain what the fuss is about sexuality in 7 minutes is quite an undertaking, and I think they all did a great job. We'll start with our questions, with a question for Father Casaleggio. We'll ask all of the panelists the same question, and that is, if you can answer in a minute, too, that's one thing, is that please consider that. And the other is that if you'll stand, that'll be nice, if you would. Okay, the question is, if a young person came to you saying that they were unsure of their sexual identity, believing that they were attracted to the same sex, how would you counsel them?
I think it would depend on how young you're talking about. If someone is, pre-puberty, you got one issue. It may be from something they watched on TV. It may be from something someone said. If someone is older and they came, we would counsel them in the sense of trying to help them understand that they're still good people and there's something worthy about them, but try to get them some help so they can figure it out for themselves in a more direct kind of way. I think we would express our position in the sense of the church in action, not in who you are. I mean, within the Catholic Church, we've ordained priests that are homosexual with the understanding that they make a vow of celibacy and that would be lived out. But for a young person, we would, like I said, attempt to explain our position, and then being as young as they are, if they are young, trying to get them some professional help to know for sure where it is that they stand.
Okay, thank you. And also, ladies and gentlemen, you may be moved to applaud. We just ask that you not applaud during this section so that we can ask as many questions as possible. Okay, Aslam.
Well, it's not a hypothetical question.
I'm sorry?
It's not a hypothetical question, it is a real question. And this is the situation that we face in our mosques and churches and synagogues almost daily basis when people come and raise that issue. We're not sure about our sexual identity. How should we deal with that kind of situation? And certainly, as someone responsible to outline the religious perspective, we do what we are supposed to do. We tell them this is what the position of the divine guidance is, and this is what basically one is expected to do. But what if they don't agree with that? And that is the dilemma, and that is the question. Would they be condemned? Should they be ostracized? Should they be basically rejected? Or should we adopt a more compassionate perspective towards them, working with them, trying to develop a perspective through which they could see the alternatives and the other perspective also. And that is what basically we try to do, is that rather than condemning, rather than rejecting, rather than ostracizing them, we try to be more compassionate and more kind to them so that we communicate without challenging their spirituality and without challenging their commitment to God, because we believe that perhaps in a certain stage of their life, they might see the logic of the argument we are making.
I would teach a young man or woman that came into counsel with me who might be struggling with their self-identity that they are a beloved son or daughter of heavenly parents, and because of that, they have a divine nature and destiny. And they are going to find satisfaction, understanding, and fulfillment in this life as they come to understand that role that they play. And frankly, that gender is an essential role that came with them from premortality, that is part of them in this life and will continue to be after this life's over.
First of all, I've got to give an impression of how I understand the history of this issue. Briefly. I mean, this is my understanding. It isn't that we decide our sexual orientation, it's that we discover it. And we all discover our sexual orientation. So that if there was a problem accepting what that identity is, it usually was not the problem of the individual who was identifying their sexual orientation, but rather it was what they knew society felt about it that was causing them trouble. Now, the only way to find out what this person is who's coming and saying that they're confused about their sexual identity is to try to find out why they're having that difficulty. Is it a difficulty they're having with themselves, or is it a difficulty being able to express it to others? So counseling really is trying to find out what the problem is.
The UCC has a tagline that many of our churches use: whoever you are and wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. The first thing I would counsel a young person at is to affirm them and to affirm who they are and where they are at that point in their life. Sexual orientation is nowhere near as important. There's no moral judgment whatsoever to be made about it than what they do with that reality. But the second thing I would then do would be to try to put them into the context of where society currently is. There's been quite a bit of improvement and movement in terms of society's understanding of homosexuality, but we still have a lot of harassing, a lot of attitudes that certainly people who are open and out about who they are will encounter, and just to make sure that they understand that reality. But the key thing, the most important thing to do in any kind of counseling session of that nature is to affirm them.
Thank you. Candace?
Will you repeat the question?
Okie doke. The question is, if a young person came to you saying they are unsure of their sexual identity, believing that they are attracted to the same sex, how would you counsel them?
Thank you. I would counsel them with love, with encouragement, with support. I would attempt to communicate to them that they are not alone. There is absolutely nothing wrong with them. They are absolutely perfect. Because the rate of suicide among young people who are gay or lesbian is so high, and because the rate of bullying that occurs over sexual identity is so high, I think the most important thing we can do to young people is to show them that they are loved and there's nothing wrong with them.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for Aslam, and yes, Aslam. Now, Aslam, this question is not related to sexuality, but it is related to the zeitgeist out there. So I thought maybe this would be an opportunity for you to say something about this. Respectfully, does the Holy Quran teach, inspire, or encourage the killing of an individual if they do not believe in the Quran, or that it is the word of God, or that Muhammad was his prophet?
Do you want to give me a long answer or a short answer?
A short answer.
No.
Well, a little bit.
Let me quote from the scripture. And I'll quote it in Arabic so that you know that it's genuine. I'm not making it up. من قتل نفس بغير نفس أو فساد في الأرض كأنه قتل الناس جميعا. This is chapter 5, verse 57, which says that anyone who kills a person, in fact, kills the whole humanity. And the one who saves the one life, in fact, saves the whole life and the humanity as a whole. Nowhere does Islam say, or does the Quran say, that anyone who does not believe, in fact, on the contrary, the Quran says, فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفِرْ. It is the inherent right of each individual to reject the ideas that are presented as the ideas of God or to accept them. It is their inherent right to believe in the ideas that they believe in. And certainly, each and every human life, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, deserves a dignified existence. That means right to live.
Okay, thank you. Todd, can you explain the church's belief about souls waiting in heaven to come to earth for a body? In a minute. In heaven, waiting to come to earth for a body. Whether or not that's true, and if it is what would you say?
Sure. As I started with, this is all about family, and we believe that we are the literal sons and daughters of heavenly parents who created us spiritually, and that we existed with heavenly parents before coming into this world, and that the purpose of this life is to come down and obtain a physical body and to experience things with it and to overcome so that we can go home again.
Thank you. Jim, Reverend Wallis, the question is, what does your faith believe is the definition of sexual morality from God's perspective, from Scripture?
I think this is true of the Episcopal Church. The Episcopal Church is open to an investigation of the Bible on a historical, social grounds. In other words, it has a hermeneutic that informs how the Bible is to be read. It is not opposed to a critical evaluation of the text. Clearly, under some readings of the Bible, we could not ordain women. We could not ordain openly gay men. But again, that's on some readings. And the approach one takes is informed by one's hermeneutic. How you approach the text, how you define yourself in terms of the text. Now, there is no overall criterion of the Episcopal Church for determining truth in terms of Scripture. One divine, Anglican divine, claimed that truth religiously is based on the criterion of the Bible, church tradition, reason, and experience. But even that is not a criterion set by the whole Anglican Communion. In the end, the reading of the Bible is going to be, at least in the Episcopal tradition, going to be voted on by all of the members representing the church in a formal meeting in which it proclaims that the decision it comes to is being led there by God's Spirit.
Thank you. Dave, what percentage of the issues that congregants from your faith come to you for counseling for relate in some way to sexuality, whether it be teenage pregnancy, fidelity, sexual identity, infertility, birth control, etc.?
For me personally, I would say that would be a very small percentage. It just doesn't seem to have that much need in the congregation that I serve. Now that may be because the median age in the congregation I serve is about 75. But to try to push the question a little bit further in terms of how ministers within the United Church of Christ, broadly speaking, would get those kinds of issues in a counseling setting, I would say there would be a fair amount of that. I'm not sure I would deign to give a percentage for it. Probably because in most UCC churches and most UCC ministers, there is a sense of the openness and the acceptance and the affirmation that I spoke of a moment ago, and therefore people are aware that they are not going to be morally condemned by coming and talking about an issue that they have that relates to sexuality.
Okay, thank you. Candace, your faith tradition accepts homosexuality, relationships as a basis for marriage and associated legal rights. What limits do you place on the openness? For example, would your faith condone brother and sister, mother and son? If human procreation is not the core, what is the basis for any limits?
That's an interesting question, and I'm not sure I understand it.
Well, I think people heard you say that the pagan perspective is open, and they're asking just how open. I think.
Well, I think I also said that pagans do not support incest. You did hear me say that, right? Right. Okay.
Okay. Well, then that takes care of that.
Okay.
And if human procreation is not at the core, what is the basis for any limits?
Any limits that there would be a relationship that causes harm to another individual or harm in oneself, and I think that probably is the one factor that would go to play in such decisions. Did I dance around that one? Okay. Okay, good.
Sounds pretty good. Thank you. This one is for Father Casaleggio. If there is a belief that sex is good and sacred in this life, why can't priests marry?
It's just, to be real honest, that's simply a tradition within the church that could be changed tomorrow. There was a time in the early church where priests did get married, and then it became a discipline where priests didn't get married. If it did change, I don't think it would affect me, because I don't think they would ever let a priest get married. But we ordained deacons. I used to be in the Air Guard, and I went to, I forget where, for training, and there was a former Episcopal priest that had come over to the Roman Rite, and he was ordained as a Roman Catholic priest, and he was married and had 5 kids, and he was serving openly. It's strictly a discipline. It doesn't have to be. I don't know that it's going to change soon, but it could be changed.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for each of the panelists, and it has to do, we'll start with Todd. How does your faith how does your faith define adultery?
Thank you. That's an easy one. And it relates back to the law of chastity, which says any type of sexual relationship outside the bonds of matrimony is a sexual transgression. And for adultery, it would be being unfaithful to your spouse during marriage. And obviously, there are degrees of that unfaithfulness. Adultery is typically a sexual relationship outside of your marriage.
So then, okay. Because then the question would be, what is sexual conduct, but we won't go there. Okay, just adultery. Jim, Same question.
Obviously, the definition of it in the Episcopal Church now would not be gender specific. But it would be a violation of the relationship between two people of a sexual nature, where the implication of adultery is you're doing it behind somebody's back. And obviously that would be a wrong from the Episcopal Church point of view. But traditionally it's understood in terms of gender marriage. But if you open up marriage to all the sexes, then it's just a violation of the relationship that the two people have committed themselves to.
Thank you.
What he said.
Okay.
I think that the United Church of Christ definition of adultery would echo that pretty much right down the line. I would add just one thing. I think that the key to understanding an act of adultery, an act of infidelity, is the dishonesty that occurs, and therefore the harm that occurs within the nexus of the relationship that is there.
All right, thank you. Candace?
I believe that adultery is one of those things that are listed in the Old Testament and the Ten Commandments, and it's defined as a sin. And actually, that's not our book, and it's not our commandments. And pagans really don't think in terms of sin. So I'm not sure that we have such a definition of something called adultery. What we are concerned about is actions that hurt the person that you have been committed to. And that we would probably, if you're not acting with honor, and if the actions are harming someone, then that would not be supported.
And I think that what she just said is kind of the definition of adultery. I don't think adultery has to totally, it almost always leads to a sexual act, but I believe it's adultery even without a sexual act. When you're dishonest to your mate, and when you're running behind his or her back, and when you're in a relationship with another person that should be the relationship you're in with the one that you're committed to me, you're committed adultery.
So a preacher went to a town where he found people involved in promiscuity. No one has visited there before. He tells them that this is wrong. You are all going to hellfire. You all are committing sins. So at the end of the talk, the tribal chief stood up and he said, "Sir, before you came, we did not know what the sin was." So this is exactly the perspective, is that whose words you are giving prominence. In our faith tradition, we think that it's God who defines the limitations and restrictions. And we believe that any relationship that involves physical intimacy outside the institution of marriage, whether before or after, would be considered something that is basically infringing upon the covenant that one has made with the God in terms of accepting his gospel.
Could I just add one thing very quickly? Jimmy Carter got into a lot of trouble politically by talking about adultery in his heart. And I think he was very much misunderstood, but it echoes some of the things that we've just been saying. Adultery isn't necessarily an act. It's what takes place inside a person in terms of the way in which they find themselves being dishonest in a relationship.
Okay, thank you. This will be the last question for everyone, and each of you, and we'll start with Jim Wallis, our host, but the question can either be something I've selected here from the members of the audience, or if you have a final statement that you wanted to make or something that you didn't get a chance to say. So what would you prefer? Give me the question? Okay. Well, he's the host, so don't the rest of you get any ideas there. Okay. No, but you can. Okay. Why is the church directed by a voting body and not the direction of God? God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Okay. Why is the church directed by a voting body and not by the direction of God? God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Okay, a minute.
I guess my answer to that question, I do like the Episcopal way of making policy for its members. It's a democratic way, and I believe in Christology as the great democratizer. Christ is in each one of us. God speaks to each one of us. And then we, in dialogue with others, come to a consensus as to what God is calling us as a body to. But we all have Christ in us. We all have a voice. We all have a right to say what God is saying.
I'll make a closing statement. There is a reason why the Hebraic word in the Old Testament that is used for sexual intercourse is translated to know. Knowledge of one another, the intimacy that comes with that, is perhaps the single most important aspect of our human sexuality. To know another, to know myself in the context of relationship, is probably the power that comes out of sexuality and sexual relationships. The closer that we know another person, the more intimate we are with them, the more sexual morality forms and takes place within that relationship. Knowledge is key.
Thank you. Candace?
Can I do both?
Since you're the only woman and I'm the only other woman, I'm going to say, if it doesn't create a problem, is it okay if she does both? Yeah, okay. That was fast. Go ahead.
Closing statement first?
Okay, the question is, oh, what?
Closing statement?
You can either do a statement or you can answer the question.
I want to do both.
Okay, well, here's the question. What is the source of all your information? Do you and all pagans agree with you?
When you get 10 pagans in the room, you're going to have 15 different opinions. And because we have no dogma, we don't have scriptures, we don't have authorities, in researching for something like this, I'm looking for a consensus view. And you may notice I use those wiggle words a lot: most, typically, generally, may, things like that. Because there simply isn't any authoritative statement. When I do something like this, I draw from the things that I've read, the people that I know, and I do a lot of looking, and I use that academic search engine, Google, to see what I can find out.
Okay.
Closing statement?
Okay.
I'd like to thank Aleda, who never gets thanked. Okay, she's been doing this how many years?
A long time.
A long time.
Thank you. I knew there was a reason I was going to let you do both. Thank you very much. Father Dave, would you?
I'll take the question.
Okay, the question. Studies have shown that 1/3 of pregnancies end in miscarriage. Since you believe that life begins at conception, how do you reconcile this with your belief in the sacredness of life?
Well, a miscarriage is something that happens in the body. I mean, people die. We're born to die. Some die earlier than others. Some die in the womb.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm hoping that answers the question, because
Does that answer the question?
It's 1/3 of all beings coming into the earth are gone before they get here. So
With the miscarriage, and that's a death. We
Yes.
would perceive that as a death.
Okay.
We're born to. Oh, no. We believe strongly within the Catholic Church, and I've told people this, I don't know how many times.
I don't know that everybody got to hear that, but you had to do with if the person dies and has not had a chance for burial, baptism, how does that person fare then?
It's the Church's belief that God baptizes when a priest can't, especially under those kind of circumstances. God does not destroy a child because of that kind of stuff. And I've said that publicly at funerals for little babies that were born and never had a chance to be baptized, and I believe that strongly, and the Church would proclaim that.
Okay, thank you. Aslam, what would you prefer?
I will answer with a closing statement.
Okay. You want a question? Well, I'm glad you want the question because there are several of the same kind, and it has to do with this one says, why do Muslim women have to suffer genital mutilation? Why do Muslims permanently remove the possibility for women to ever experience the feeling of sexual pleasure? And there are two other, just take my word for it. There are several more in here on the same issue.
Well, according to the United Nations, the female mutilation, what is it called? FMG?
Yes, female
Yes.
genital mutilation.
Yes. That is prevalent only in the 7% of the societies that identify with Islam and Muslims. 93% of the women who go through this kind of phase and this kind of barbarism are basically either the Christians or Hindus or people belonging to other faiths. That is the study of the United Nations. So it is not part of Islam, it is part of culture. And certainly Islam has taken a very strong position on that from the very beginning, that any mutilation of the body is against the divine guidance and against the divine laws.
All right, thank you very much. And that's something that a number of people thought was attributable to the Quran. So thank you for clearing that up. Todd, what would you prefer?
I'll make a statement.
Okay.
All right. My wife of 23 years is with me here tonight, and we have 4 children together. Nothing that I have done in my life has brought me the joy that I have experienced within the walls of my own home. I'm grateful for the doctrine that teaches me to be a moral person, because it's brought protection within our marriage. It has provided a sense of happiness and well-being and stability, and we've been able to raise our children in that protection with them knowing that they have a mom and dad who love them, who are completely devoted to one another. And I fear for our society as the family continues to disintegrate, because it's not healthy. It's not healthy for our kids. It's not healthy for our society. And I'm grateful to have that in my own life.
Thank you very much, Todd. And that was the last word. And on that note, we would like to thank our panel once more, thank all of you who are here. I'll give you, okay.